Good morning, I'm Councillor Rob Trout and I'm Chair of the Corporate Overview and Scrutiny Management Board of Durham County Council. Welcome to this remote meeting taking place on Friday the 22nd of January 2021, which is being recorded live to the Council's website and will be available to be viewed for a minimum of 6 months. Please be aware that any footage from the meeting can be used in subsequent media broadcasts. I'd like to give a warm welcome to members, officers and any members of the public or media who are watching this live feed of the meeting. Before I commence with the formal business on the agenda, I'd like to cover some of the housekeeping issues for us all to follow. All participants must mute their microphone. To speak, please use the chat function on the right hand side. Type RTS, which stands for request to speak. And remember, everyone in the meeting can see the messages in the chat function. When invited to speak, please remember to unmute your microphone, and once invited to speak, please introduce yourself with your name and your position, unless you've already introduced yourself earlier in the meeting. If you're having issues with connectivity, try switching off your video and use just the telephone function. If connectivity issues continue, you may have to leave the meeting and rejoin to get a better signal. And if my connection is lost, the Vice Chair, Councillor Alison Beattie, will take over until my connection is restored. Right, we'll go straight into the agenda. Item 1 is apologies for absence. Have we received any apologies, Ian?
Yes, Chair, we have apologies from Councillors John Robinson and Alan Shield.
Thank you, Ian. And do we have any substitute members?
No, Chair, we have no substitute members.
Thanks, Ian. Item 3, the minutes of the meeting held on the 17th of December 2020. Can we agree those minutes is the correct record, please?
Agreed.
Agreed.
Right, thanks everyone. And are there any matters arising? Jenny?
Chair, there's 2 matters arising to mention. The first is at page 10 of the minutes and reflects comments the third and second paragraph from the bottom from Councillor Turnbull regarding members being informed of staff who had left the authority due to ill health or having passed away. We've had a response from the head of legal to say that members should be informed when senior officers or those who are working closely with members leave or pass away. And my understanding is that this would normally come from the corporate directors or from the heads of service as a communication to group leaders. So all I can say, if there's any examples of where that doesn't happen, can members let us know, Chair. The second matter arising is on page 13 of the minutes and relates to the notice of key decisions discussion last time in response to Councillor Hopgood's query about the consultation on leisure services not showing in the notice of key decisions. Again, I've had a response from the head of legal chair to say that the decision that went through last year, which preceded the consultation, was a key decision. Once it had been taken, it does not need to be retained on the forward plan. If decisions that give effect to that previous decision, then there is no need for a fresh notice, Chair. So that's the full response.
Okay, Jenny, thanks for that update. I have nobody indicating that they wish to speak, so we'll go to item 4 on the agenda, which is declarations of interest. Do any members have any declarations? I have nobody indicating that they have any declarations. Item 5 on the agenda is the workforce transformation, enabling smarter working. It's the report of the Interim Corporate Director of Resources, and we have Alison Lazazara and Vicky Murray here this morning to present the report. So, Alison, Vicky, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair. This is a joint report that we're going to share between us if that's okay for members, which we'll run through the slides. Vicky, are you okay to share the slides?
Yeah, I'm just bringing those up for everybody to see. Won't be a moment. Okay, everybody should be able to see that now, Alison, if you'd like to start.
Thank you, Vicky. Thanks, Vicky. The slides in front of you take you through the progress that's been made in relation to our transformation as a council and smarter working, and what we've actually done as a result of a lot of work in the last year in relation to some of the things that we've seen, where we started and where we've ended up as a council, and what's next also. So I think it's fair to say that where we started, we obviously had a culture that was very different to where we are as a council. We had a culture of fairly 9 till 5 in terms of office working, a culture of you know, very much less of the digital and ICT, more of the paper-based, and very much a presence in the organisation and offices. So this is where we started as a council some time ago, I have to say. We have had a journey that's gone on for some time, so where we are now as a council isn't new. The journey so far started way back before the current pandemic hit us, and we start to look at the transformation programme. So this has been in place for a couple of years now, which members will be aware. And we had the transformation outcomes, which were to design our services from the outside in, meeting customer needs at a reduced cost to the council, to help our communities to be self-resilient and reliant, to move our partnerships from good to great, and to become renowned for our skilled and flexible workforce and employee engagement. And there were 3 strands to our transformation journey, which were inspiring people, inspiring places and inspiring change. A lot of that was paramount in terms of smarter working commencing. So this is a journey we've been on for some time. We also introduced our values, organisational values, a couple of years ago now, which were the open values, and they were set against the backdrop of the transformation programme and where we intended to be as we move forward as a council. So they are outcome focused, people focused, empowering and innovative. And at the same time, we had key strands of our transformation programme, which were digital organisation, digital customer and digital community. So all of these things have been in train for a couple of years now in order to take the council into the future and the future direction. We also have a number of digital principles that we've been working towards for a while now through our transformation programme and our digital strategy. So these are being digital by design, being driven by data, designing services that are people and outcome focused, designing for scale, building for sustainability, and you can see the list there, so I'm not going to go through them all, but very much using automation and delivering against the digital agenda. So we were already on this journey of transformation, both internally and outward facing. One of the things that we'd also started to do a couple of years ago was look to how we modernise our own workforce through our transformation programme. So we developed strategic workforce priorities and initiatives in terms of those that would add value and take the organisation forward rather than stand still. We have been on a journey of transforming and redesigning services, roles and processes so they're fit for purpose in terms of the future direction and what the council may face. We've got a strong digital strategy and connectivity programme. We've also set off modernising our HR policies and procedures to make sure they were fit for purpose, streamlined and modernised for the future world and the future workforce. We've done a lot of work with our leaders and managers and made sure that our leadership was enabling empowerment and new ways of working for the workforce. And we've done an awful lot in terms of workforce development planning and making sure that we were aware of the new skills required for the future and equipping our workforce with those skills. We've looked at more generic roles council-wide to support the customer journey and how individuals interact with the council, and also better use of technology in all job roles, whether that be from frontline to back office, and how we can use those tools better to be more efficient. And then finally, using our data to make decisions. So every decision we make is data-led. So a lot of work already before the pandemic. We then obviously, as members will be aware, in the last year, since March last year, have been hit with the pandemic, COVID-19, which really has been the catalyst for change and has created an unprecedented situation. What it has done is forced us rapidly through our journey of transformation as a council. One of the things we did was we enabled over 8,000 staff very quickly to work remotely, almost overnight, using our IT solutions and physical resources. We were able to reassess our HR and smarter working policies and respond really rapidly. And we also looked at our buildings and made sure that they were safe for those who had to visit a building or be in a building, and also our frontline work sites as well. It has brought many challenges, all of which we've risen to and responded to incredibly rapidly. And no doubt many of us will remember this forever in terms of the year that changed the workplace and just how we deliver services. They are challenging times for our workforce and our residents and how people access services, but through our technology, our workforce development and our approach to HR policies, we've managed to take the workforce through massive change over the last year. We've done it with resilience, resourcefulness and passion from our staff who've risen to the challenge, and we've had some fantastic results in terms of staff, almost changing overnight to working practices differently, working from home, and also those continuing on the front line in really difficult and challenging situations, and those that have stepped forward and moved into new roles as part of the flexible organisational approach. So a real catalyst for change. One of the things we did very early on was look at our workforce response to COVID-19, which was, absolutely huge in terms of massive workforce, all very different in terms of the service they provide. Some of the things that we had to do very quickly, we had to move to support all services, including schools, with recovery, restoration, disruption and contingency planning. We had to have very robust contingency plans in place very quickly. We overcame school closures and challenges, which were a challenge both for our schools, parents, children, but also our own workforce. And we ended up having to very quickly move to a blended approach to training. As an organisation of this size, the amount of training we were delivering was, huge, and we almost overnight digitised the majority of that training to get us through this process, whilst ensuring that people could still include and have the training that are required to continue to do their roles effectively. We put in place an emergency mobilisation process, which we saw over 500 staff redeployed to other areas of council during the peak, and that was voluntary as well. We had staff coming forward, they were given training, they were given PPE, they were given support to move into different roles. So, very different staff moving into roles that they've never done before, and really made a success of that. We supported all services and schools with restoration and recovery and disruption, and obviously we've been at different peaks, different challenges throughout the year where we've had to change our stance. And one of the things probably of the most challenging was navigating through the vast range of complex workforce related issues, both in relation to schools and services. As members will know, the guidance changed almost daily at some points, weekly at others. And we've had a constant, communication and engagement with the workforce and leaders in order to make sure that we've done things the best we can, as quick as we can. We've had to modernise our development system, our training and development system. We've digitised a system which we've actually used for recruiting to care roles through the Care Academy. We've used it for recruiting our own staff, moving our staff around, undertaking redeployment, and we've also used it to digitise all of our training, so that development system has been really underpinning a lot of what we've done in the last year and moving really, really fast. Mental health and wellbeing initiatives have been at the forefront of everything, and we've been very keen to think about, what different staff groups need in different times and different job roles. What somebody needs on the front line is very different to what somebody needs feeling possibly isolated in a home working environment. So we've got a range of things that we've continually reviewed in terms of support, training and development, the Employee Assistance Programme, and just new ways of doing things to try and support people who have struggled throughout this period. We have managed to be one of the councils who have still done an apprenticeship programme this year. You know, it was important to the council in terms of this is important for our young people. It would be a challenge under COVID challenges. However, through virtual recruitment and induction, we managed to recruit 47 apprentices. All of that went really well, and we continue to be involved and supportive of those as we move forward. We have also signed up to the government's Kickstart scheme and have identified 91 job placements for those individuals on universal credit who will be eligible for that scheme. So really trying to help those who are unemployed at the moment and you know, really in need of some work and some job placements. So that will be taken forward in the coming months, and we'll be working with Job Centre Plus to offer those placements to young people on universal credit. We also have to think very carefully around the interim HR arrangements for home working, which was something we'd never done before. We have groups of staff who permanently home work, but this was something different. This was a model that had to happen overnight. We moved very quickly to an interim HR working from home policy, which provided all of the questions and answers for staff. It provided the guidance for managers and how to manage remotely, and it gave some tips and techniques in terms of just managing yourself and managing others. We used a business case approach, so any teams who needed to be into offices or premises went through a business case sort of analysis to make sure that we were making the right decisions. And anybody who was actually in offices, they were subject to risk assessments, you know, health and safety parameters around the buildings and how you work within the buildings, and training and development. We also looked at communication being regular to managers and employees. One of the feedbacks that we've had constantly through this programme has been the communications and keeping people informed and not feeling isolated. We worked with HR, health and safety and ICT to make sure that we were able to provide kit to people at home. We've delivered desks, we've had a drive-through facility, we've provided ICT equipment. So anything anybody's needed, we've done, and we've had display screen equipment assessments conducted in the home working environment to make sure that individuals are working in a safe environment with everything that they need. The guidance has been constantly changing, and we've constantly reviewed that. We've looked at contractual implications, we've managed our way through it, and the health and wellbeing approach has been wrapped around the whole interim home working arrangements because it's been different for different people and has gone on for a long time now. So it's been one of the things at the forefront of our work. The constant one-to-one discussions have continued to take place, the support for individuals, and this has been constant. It might have been done virtually, but nothing has changed. In fact, I would say we've probably done more in terms of support and making sure that individuals have regular discussions with their managers, but also as part of teams. We've managed to also do large briefings with managers and with members of staff and teams themselves, where, you know, very much like this meeting, there have been a number of people on a call to try and keep that momentum going around not feeling isolated in the home working environment. So a lot of work gone into temporary interim home working arrangements to address this period.
So I'm going to take over the presentation for a little while and really talk in a little bit more detail around the digital response to COVID, following on from Alison's update on the workplace response. So as Alison's already discussed previously, our digital strategy has three core themes: digital customer, digital organisation and digital communities. And we've really framed our digital response around those key themes, really looking at each of these areas to determine what we needed to do to be enable our customers, organisation and communities to continue to function effectively, have the tools and equipment and connectivity they need over the period, and have the right support as well as underpinning and supporting the initiatives across the whole organisation. So looking at each of these in detail, from a digital customer perspective, we really saw a significant change in customer behaviours and customer needs throughout the pandemic period. Just some of the activity that we conducted to support our customers was the development of new online form development, where perhaps previously somebody would have needed to come into one of our facilities, sites, customer access points, etc., to access services, but also existing form enhancement, so changes some of our forms and processes to enable people to go about their business digitally, whether that's providing us with information, evidence, and supporting the outcomes of requests and support that they need. Communication has been absolutely key, not only responding to communications that we receive or contact that we receive, but also proactive contact. And we've used various channels, including SMS functionality, to support that proactive content, along with enhanced social media and a website offer, which has included the development of a web chat channel. Again, just providing another channel in which people can engage with us during what has been a really challenging time. Customer feedback has been at the heart of the changes that we've made throughout the pandemic period. So we've continued to develop our approach to gathering and utilising that feedback to inform our service offer and ensure that we're responding to the new challenges that have been faced. We've seen changes to our service opening hours to enable ease of access for residents, our partners and our people. And digital skills and adoption have been key, not only from an organisational perspective, but also for our customers who are interacting with us in different ways. So lots of work has gone into providing additional support in this area and helping to people adopt to digital channels in the new environment that they're living in. We've supported an enhanced multi-channel communication, so we've got a range of communication channels there for people to access, particularly through our peak and busiest times, and the shaping of our online content and proactive communication has been key. From an organisation perspective, a lot of the work of my team and supporting teams across the authority have been very much around the remote access. As Alison's already advised, we were able to get more than 8,000 of our staff working pretty much overnight remotely, and this was built on the strong foundations and the strong work that we'd completed prior to the pandemic, putting in place our Microsoft 365 platform, but also supported through other digital solutions that in particular allowed our contact centre environments, which historically had not been able to work as remotely and flexibly as some of our other roles, working from home to ensure that we had the right support in place for our residents. Much the same as our HR policies required review, our ICT policies have also required change and review, whether that be new communication applications that we're using and to ensure that we're using those safely, or whether that be looking at our wider cybersecurity and information security approach. Unified communications has been key. Enabling our telephony and communications to continue during this period has been enabled by new technologies, changing technologies, which have allowed us to roll out soft phones across much of the estate, enabling people to stay in contact internally and externally. The remote and self-serve support and drive-through collection point has been key in making sure that people have the right tools that they need to do their role and to be able to get access to equipment in a COVID-safe manner. Cybersecurity has been a huge focus, not only during the pandemic, but prior, of course, but certainly during the pandemic as more of our people are working in different spaces, and just the significant increase in security attacks that we have seen across the world, not only across our council. It's been clear that we needed to put in some new measures and review our current approaches, which we've done, and thus far we've managed to keep our estate safe and secure and our residents' information safe and secure. As Alison has already talked about, a data-led approach has been key throughout COVID-19, and developing a data warehouse and dashboards to both store and share that data has been a key deliverable in my team. And digital democracy, meetings like we are holding today and enabling residents to be able to understand that the key decision making within the council is ongoing, has really been enabled by our digital offer. And as previously mentioned, the development of the customer feedback approach, both from our internal customers and external customers, has been key to make sure that we're continuing to put in place any change in offers that are required. And digital communities, our community hub and the standing up of that hub has been absolutely key in terms of support for our residents and to enable our volunteering support and support of the wider community to come together really effectively throughout the period. We've supported our partners, including the NHS, with connectivity upgrades to enable them to use spare network capacity to support hospitals in Durham during the crisis. We've supported digital adoption through first point of contact, and we've supported our schools and continue to do so as the remote learning offer is ever changing. This has included support of the DFE rollout of over 1,000 laptops to disadvantaged children. And through our Digital Durham programme, we've continued to drive forward connectivity, link people with devices and support digital inclusion projects, which have been key during the last year. So in terms of data and insight, absolutely crucial, not only over the period we've been through, but in order to make data-led decision making moving forward. So we've been exploring the data we hold to identify opportunities to track and highlight how effectively we have navigated the shift to virtual working. We've analysed that data to identify where disruptions to ways of working are having the greatest impact and supported our employees to explore their own working patterns. And the data that we're working to unlock includes how employee collaboration is changing, is the well-being of our employees being protected, and the effectiveness of our remote meetings, the impact that that's having on our workforce, both positive and opportunities for improvement. And also, are our employees able to create and share effectively while working remotely? But as we're aware that all of the work that we've done and the pandemic has had a significant impact on leadership, management and the workforce. As you'll see, there's quite a number of points that are raised on this slide, and I know that meeting attendees have a copy of this slide pack, so I don't intend to go through each one of these, but just picking out some of the highlights in terms of the impact on our leadership, management and workforce has been that shift to a more flexible culture, both in terms of roles and skills, rapid adoption of technology, more than we would have ever anticipated when we were planning the rollout of our digital strategy and our transformational working activity. Pivoting to a digital future and delivering accessible online services. But it's really brought out some key areas in terms of innovation and creativity, the empowerment within our staff, talent management, trust, engagement and recognition, and strong and supportive leadership and management. And in terms of impact on our residents, partners and communities, again, I'll just pick out the key highlights. We've seen changing customer requirements, new ways required to enable our residents to interact with the council. We've seen actually increases in satisfaction with our new ways of working, which has been great to see and build into our plans for the future. We've seen change in service offers, data-led decision making, and a real community-led approach that is key for us to build on in the future. So in terms of the future plans, what's next? Well, the remainder of this presentation will run through some of the staff feedback that we've gathered and how we're using that and also the wealth of experience that we've had over the last 9 months to guide our future work design. We'll be carefully considering the benefits and challenges that we've experienced, and this will support our evidence-based decision-making approach, and it will underpin the new working practices which will mitigate and control risks to work and well-being, as well as capitalising on the benefits that we've seen. So now I'm going to hand back to Alison, who'll take us through the remainder of the presentation.
Thank you, Vicky. So just wanted to take members through some of the employee feedback that we've had. We've tested feedback regularly throughout the last year to make sure that we were doing everything we could for the organisation, and also to respond to any areas of concern. We'd done a number of surveys and they were sort of around themes of supporting the response. We asked around maintaining critical services. We also asked questions around ICT and digital capability, staff wellbeing and resilience, and business continuity. All these areas our employees said were working really, really well. In terms of what learning we could take forward, we had some of the comments, you can see them there. It can be more productive to work at home on certain projects. Going into the office was one project, one comment. We are adaptable to any situation. Together as a council, we are strong, being able to think very differently of doing things is so important. And the councils have provided us with the tools to be able to work from home more effectively. Really good comments around the use of Teams and Microsoft Office. So the first slide just gave you an idea of the real positives that were feeding back. That was just a view of some of the things and individuals felt that we needed to move forward and retain. The key themes in a lot of the surveys and just some of the high level responses, you can see there we asked questions around demonstrating our values. 21% of participants identified their ability to be outcome focused better. If you look further down, 25% identified their ability to be empowered was better. You can see moving across there the mental health and well-being. We have 52% of managers who felt the well-being of their staff was the same or better. Communication, really, really high marks in terms of the impact of communication. 90% of respondents felt that they were well informed by the council's management and regular updates. And then collaboration, very, very high again, in terms of individuals feeling that they were collaborating more, even in the current environment across teams. So some really high responses coming from the surveys that we did, and some real positives. The lessons that we need to embed through culture change, these came from our own staff and our own managers. So we've taken these in terms of how they'll shape our future plans. They felt that the things we did really well was that we demonstrated a shared sense of purpose that emerged throughout the COVID experience and pandemic. We've certainly lived our values. We've been outcome focused, people focused, empowering and innovative as a council. We've improved collaboration massively between local authorities, other public sector bodies, but also between services within the council. And the adoption of place-based models and systems for leadership need to be taken forward. Frontline staff being given the space to do what they judge to be the best for individuals, and looking at work being an activity, not a place. We've demonstrated in the last year through the way that a lot of individuals have worked that you don't need to be in a place to work and produce the outcomes that you need. It's an activity, not a place. We have, really maintained flexibility around individual and team roles, and we need to take that forward as we move forward as well. So just thinking about some of the research around the future of local government and how this fits in with, what we're being told around what local government will look like as we move forward. We know remote working will be retained by a large proportion of staff. One of the things we're looking at is a blended approach to that. So it isn't what we have at the minute, but it isn't what we had before. It's a blended approach. Digital tools that enable a large proportion of council-run services to be delivered remotely. We were already on this journey. It helps us to deliver our services. It helps people to help themselves. And it enables people to be able to access our services as well. So again, we'll be taking that digital agenda forward at pace. Increase and enhance public participation and engagement, leading to improved decision making and better outcomes for communities. Again, taking this forward, learning from what we've done in the last year and doing more of that, and sharing power with local communities, embedding that community asset and strengths based approach. greater and new types of collaboration between councils, partners and private sectors and communities to achieve better outcomes. We couldn't have got through the last year without working really hard across, with our partners, with the voluntary sectors and with our communities. And I think we can all see that in terms of what we've delivered and how we've delivered it together. So in terms of the future workplace model, we are working on a future workplace model that will take us into what is just being described as the future of local government. And we have a future direction and plan which builds on where we started right at the beginning of the presentation around inspiring people, inspiring change and inspiring places. We are looking at the what, which is the work and how we do our work and how we the most efficient that we can be. So using the opportunities that technology brings and how we interact with our customers and processes. We'll be looking at the who, the workforce, and make sure that we're doing robust workforce planning, focusing on capability and capacity. And then the workplace, the where, and really homing in on that work as an activity, not a place, and how we bring that into the HQ, the other strategic sites, and the principle of a blended model of work where we're still able to deliver some really good services, but being really efficient and mobile at the same time. So we're looking at this now as we move forward. So that concludes the presentation, which really, members, takes you back right through where we started, showing you the building blocks that we started with, taking you through the pandemic and what we changed and what we took forward, and then taking you through to what we've learned and what we intend to take forward. So I'm sure Vicky or I are happy to answer any questions that members may have.
Thanks, Alison. Thanks, Vicky, for that very thorough report and very timely too. The one thing that struck me about the report was the level of preparedness that had gone in beforehand. We've been talking about transformation for some time as a council and as a management board, and that's allowed us in many ways to steal a march. We almost took it in our stride that as soon as the regulations were issued on remote working, we were straight to business as usual. Clearly, there are challenges presented, and we learn as we move on. But I think we've had a great start because of the level of preparedness through the transformation programme leading up to the pandemic. So thanks for that report. I want to take questions from the floor now. The first one I have is Councillor Mark Wilkes.
Good morning, Chair, and thank you for the report. And I'd just like to pass my personal thanks on to everybody who's out there working, particularly in your team, because without you, we wouldn't have been able to actually get on and do what we've been doing over the last 12 months. And I know it's been hard work for a lot of officers and they've had a lot to do. That said, it is scrutiny, so I do want to challenge a couple of things. We've been 12 years into a unitary authority now, and we still have some public services which people can't get online. And some of them are really basic things. So to give you an example, somebody contacted my colleague to try and get a permit, a residence permit for one of the controlled parking zones, because they'd gone to the parking centre because there was no information online, didn't say it was shut. And when they got there, they couldn't get in. There was somebody in there, but the door was locked and they wouldn't let them in. So they tried to do it online, and of course you can't do it online. The only way to do it is in the parking shop or to get a paper form and post it back. So if you've not got a printer at home, you basically couldn't get a parking permit. And I'm wondering how many services there are like that, where we would have expected by now as councillors that such a simple thing as filling in a form and submitting it should be available online, particularly at the moment, but also just generally to make sure that as an authority we're as efficient as possible. So that's one thing in terms of the digital situation with customers. But then one of the other issues that I still have after years of raising this is when not everybody will log in and send in CRM reports using the system, because it's just impossible sometimes to do it, especially when you're out and about reporting things. And it's even worse for councillors sometimes. So we'll take a photograph, we'll email it into the help desk with an issue, which is what we're told to do. It'll get passed across, but the person who receives it at the other end never gets to see the photograph. It just never finds its way there. We don't have a system which allows that to be done. So I end up having to copy in the relevant officer as well. But in other cases, the public are sending in photographs. It never gets to the end of line, frontline person, and it seems like such an easy, sensible way of doing things. So I guess I'm not particularly asking for a response to specific examples that I'm giving there, but it's more about how long is it going to take for us to get to a point where all of the services which really should be available online are available online? And why aren't simple things like making sure somebody can see where reports come into the CRM, seeing a picture, why aren't these things still now in place? Thank you.
Alison, Vicky?
Yeah, I'm happy to pick up on the points that have been raised. Members may be aware that we've got a significant digital programme of transformation in terms of not only process reviews, but then the digitisation of those processes, and that spans the whole life cycle of the digital strategy, at least the next 2 years. I'm sure that members will understand that some of the work that we had programmed and prioritised within that programme has actually been impacted by additional work that we've needed to do at pace as a result of COVID. There do still remain some processes that are not digitised, and there are different reasons behind them. Some may be integration with legacy systems, that it's just not as easy to be able to pull that information and get those systems to speak to each other effectively. And some are just because, in terms of priority and the scale of work that we're dealing with, will be a number of factors that we take into play, also with customer feedback as well. So as part of our response to COVID, if you like, we have been reprofiling and reprioritising that digital programme, determining are there any changes to the prioritisation in terms of the new services that we now need to stand up and digitise. So, for example, historically, we were unable to provide certain evidence because of DWP guidelines. Working with the DWP, we've now made it so that all evidence that needs to be submitted for benefits claims, for example, are now fully digitised. So I think need changes, and we're trying to respond to that as effectively as possible. I will take away the parking issue, because my team does work with various other services on that prioritisation. When we will arrive at a point where everything is being digitised, sometimes depends on the legacy systems that we have within our architecture, and if they are coming close to closure, it's not worth re-digitising at this moment in time, because we know we might be moving them to a new application. But absolutely, continue to work with my team to ensure that those most important processes are being digitised as quickly as possible. In terms of the photograph situation, we do have, although there are some limitations within our CRM in terms of sharing that, we do have workaround systems where we'll engage directly with the teams that are out there and delivering services. So when photographs are sent to us, we will share those with the team. But Councillor Wilkes, if you continue just to feed into me any instances where that isn't happening and that workaround isn't being applied, I'll make sure I pick that up immediately for you.
Thanks, Vicky. Mark wants to come back.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you, Vicky, and I will do that. Just in terms of the legacy systems and the issues, I mean, I know we've got rid of hundreds of different pieces of software since we became a unitary authority. The amount of stuff that was coming in from all the different councils, I think we ended up with about 800 or 900 different pieces of software we were using. So I understand the difficulty of all of this. But we have got certain things that the public are wanting to do online and they can't do. And I'm just wondering, where is the balance between getting an outside organisation to do portions of this work, or is it doing it all internally? And I wonder if you could give us an indication of whether things can be speeded up by using outside companies to do this. And I know the things we do that we use outside companies with IT, because it's just beyond the capacity or the capabilities for us. Some of it's too technical, some of it we just don't have the time. But it's where that balance is, and whether more investment into the structure so that we can get things done more quickly, that balance between that and the additional cost of using, say, an outside company because something's difficult. I was wondering if you could give us an idea of where the level is on this and whether there are scopes there to bring things forward more quickly. A prime example at the moment, we've got our household waste sites pretty much costing us a fortune because of the traffic management, and I know there's a process being worked on to try and put a booking system in.
Yeah.
But I was asking for this in April. I don't know when this process actually started, but it has been a number of months now. And if everything we do is having to be done internally and clogging up the time of the officers in those relevant departments, there comes a point where you have to take something outside and ask somebody to help you with it. Otherwise, it just never gets done. And sometimes it can actually be cost effective to do that, because if you're spending thousands of pounds a day on traffic management and you can cut down that cost significantly, then that's what we should be doing to save the taxpayer money.
Can we comment on that?
Chair.
Yeah, absolutely. So the point that you raised there about the HWRC booking process is absolutely a process that the team are working on and have been working on. And in those types of situations, especially where there may be new pressures, changing pressures for the organisation, our stance would always be to look at a range of options in terms of tackling the issue and determining and building a business case to understand where best resource is required, whether that's additional resource either internally through the redeployment scheme that Alison talked about within the presentation, and sort of that reprofiling and moving of capacity from certain tasks to others that are a greater priority as a result of the work that's going on at the moment, whether that's looking externally at another solution that could fit within our architecture and procurement of that, or whether it's looking to recruit additional people into our internal team. So there is a process that we go through. There is a sort of a range of options that we look at where we never limit ourselves to just looking internally to be able to do that. We look at the holistic need of the requirement and requirements of the solution that we need to put in place. And with the rapid adoption, the significant change in customer needs that we've seen over the last 9 to 10 months, that whole prioritisation will change as we move through it. At the moment, it's very much just about finding that balance between the higher profile and higher priority COVID pressures versus the ongoing programme of work.
Thanks, Vicky. We do receive customer feedback reports at this committee as well, so it may be an opportunity then to take an indication of where we are from a customer perspective as well. Fraser Tinsley.
Thanks, Rob. Comment and a question, really. First of all, I'd just like to thank the staff. A huge amount of work done over the last year. I think everyone agrees there's probably 10 years work being done in 10 months, and that's a real testament to the staff who have been able to do that. But first of all, just to comment, something Councillor Wilkes brought up there in terms of really it's about the split between what's digital, what isn't. And I think really if you look at what we do across our services, I think we're doing it pretty well. If you look, compare it to say what governments do, and universal credit's probably one of the best examples. It's just digital. That's the only option, but we do simply have more flexibility, and I think we're responding to what our customers, our residents' needs are better than some other organisations are. But I just want to come on to a question. I think what's key, and everybody gets this, is one of the biggest changes for our staff has been home working, and it's been a huge change. And but I think that does bring its challenges, and we've spoke about those. But just the financial side was something I wanted to bring up, and I think it's really interesting what Alison was saying there, because I think that home working is here to stay in some form, because some people like it, some people are more productive. And also, if you look at, for example, County Hall, a building that's going to be less than a third of the size of the current building, we're going to have 1,000 staffs and 700 desks. So by definition, people are going to have to be home working. But I was just looking there that I think there's something we could bring up with staff, and I'd like that to be done. HMRC offer £6 per week tax relief for home working. And if you take across 8,000 staff who've been working from home for the last year, that's £800,000 potentially, based on £100 per member of staff that could claim. And if this is going to be moving forward, this could potentially run into many millions of pounds that could be the money in our staff's pockets rather than in the taxman's pocket. And I just wonder, could staff look at a way to make sure, first of all, that information is available to staff, that relief is available to them? I know myself, I think I've noticed my gas bill has gone up over the last few months when I've been at home more, and I think this is something that would help, particularly in the context now where we have a lot of public sector pay restraint. So that's something that would be really important, and looking at ways we can maybe, is there any way to do this at source as well, which would be really important, just to give ourselves and our staff some extra financial support in what are difficult times. So I'd be grateful if that could be looked into. Thank you, Chair.
Thanks, Fraser. Vicky, Alison, any comments on that?
Yes, Chair. Thank you, Councillor Tinsley. We have raised this with our staff a number of times. So as soon as it was, we became aware of it, we issued communications to our staff. I believe there's been a large take-up across the board in terms of accessing that support. We remind staff constantly, and it's constantly on there in terms of our intranet as one of the support mechanisms. So yes, absolutely. Anything we can do, and I think the organisation's been incredibly supportive, both in terms of, you know, just information available or how we can support individuals who have care and responsibilities, children, whatever it might be. We've sort of put it out there to staff and keep reminding individuals and reminding managers as well. So yeah, that's been out there for some time, and we keep reminding staff to obviously look to take that up, and I believe quite a few of them have.
Do you have to make a self-assessment tax return to claim it back, or is there any other way to do it? I know that's quite onerous for people.
I'm not quite sure. I haven't looked at it myself, but I will have a look at that, Councillor Tinsley.
Okay. Thanks.
I don't think it's very onerous because I know quite a few people have done it, but I will have a look at that.
Great, thanks a lot.
Right, thanks, Alison. Amanda Hopgood.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. Just for Fraser, you just go on to gov.uk and do it there. You just need your national insurance number and things, so it is quite straightforward for that, because I know people who've done it. The question, I've got a couple of comments. First, thank you, Alison and Vicky, for everything, and to the staff for what you've done, for how you've turned things round and adapted, because it is acknowledged by everybody how much work's been done there. I think staff have adapted well, and I'm really pleased to see the things you've got in place around staff welfare, because that's something that really sits with me, because I'm conscious myself how many hours we're doing, and I think most people on this call, now that there is nowhere else to go, you're logging on and you're probably doing way more hours than you've ever done in years, because it is so easy. You've got everything at home. So I've got a question around, are we monitoring the number of hours that people are doing? Because that really does concern me. One, about whether their workload is too much for them and whether they're being able to cope. I totally appreciate that we need to be flexible, especially at the moment when people are homeschooling as well. So I know people where the wife gets up, does 2 hours work from 6 till 8, then she homeschools, then the husband does his work during the day because they're all at home, then he knocks off and she finishes off 7 till 10 at night. Now, that's fine, that works for them, but I would be really worried if we've got staff who are logged on from 7 in the morning till 10 at night, and I hope somebody is monitoring the hours to make sure, and that's being picked up in appraisals, just to be concerned about the number of hours people are putting in.
That one for you, Alison?
It is, yes. Thanks, Amanda. We are. I mean, we're very conscious in terms of the amount of effort and hours people are putting in, and also the constraints they have in their homework and environment. So as I've said, we're pushing out as much as we can in terms of that support and flexibility. And actually, if you need to work at a different time, we're trying to be more outcome focused rather than you have to be sort of at your computer between time A and time B. So actually it's more around what you produce and giving people just that ability to have more flexibility, but taking into account the care responsibilities, people with young children at home. So there's a myriad of things that we're putting out there in terms of support. One of the big things we've done is leadership in terms of managers' roles and the expectations managers have. And we are conscious, and I know Vicky may want to come in on this, in terms of looking at what the ICT can do to help us to monitor sort of the hours that people are on Teams or on meetings or actually just logged in. So we're looking at all of that intelligence in the background to be able to try and bring some sort of intelligence to it, to be doing that tracking. In terms of the one-to-ones, they are continuing. I would say probably even more so than they ever did. Our managers are really making a distinct effort to make sure that contact is constant. So there's regular discussions with managers and staff around the expectations, the volume of work. I think, and also we're in a position now where we're looking to prioritise work for staff to be able to take some of that burden from them. So we're going through a phase at the moment working with our managers around what they can reprioritise to support staff and take some of the pressure off also. Vicky, I don't know whether you want to add anything from an ICT perspective.
Yeah, absolutely. So there is functionality within the Microsoft tools. The functionality is called My Analytics, and we're really working with members of staff to help them to understand how they can use this effectively. So it's very, it's self-managed. It's gives you lots of detail about what your average day looks like, what time you're on average you're starting, finishing, are you having 3 days during the week, to prevent people from necessarily working every single day, even on a weekend. It encourages people to book focus time, but it also gives them some analysis around things, for example, like the data shows that you tend to respond to an email within 10 minutes of receiving it. Do you need to be responding that quickly? Can you maybe batch your emails? So it automatically gives hints and tips. There's some wider data sets that we're looking at, and my team are currently investigating to bring a report through corporate management team to look at how we can roll that data up and look at it across the whole organisation. Wouldn't be a situation where we would be able to pick out individuals. It's fully anonymised, but it would give us the feel of what are the average hours people are working, how many people are working on standard out of hours.
Yeah, I think you're frozen. I think we're going to have to leave that, and we'll come back with Vicky if we need to. Are you okay with that, Amanda, for the time being?
Yeah, Chair, that it's really good. That was just my main concern about people logging on and doing sort of 12 hours a day, because it's easy to do, and I'm sure nearly every member on here is guilty of it as well.
Yeah, I'm sure you're right, Amanda. Right, with Vicky being out of the field of play for the time being, we'll go to. Oh, Vicky, you're back. Do you have any comments you want to add to that?
Yes, I'm not sure what happened.
No, you're frozen again.
And in Teams classrooms, and another daughter also.
No, you keep breaking up, Vicky. We're going to have to leave it there. Thanks. I think you've answered Amanda's question as fully as she needed answering. Eddie Adam.
Thanks, Chair. Councillor Eddie Adam, representing Aycliffe West and Chair of Environment and Sustainable Communities Overview and Scrutiny Committee. Obviously, the report that you've given us is an excellent report. It seems positive, and also that there's been a real effective transformation in what we've done, as other members have previously said. That has, from my perspective, seemed seamless in some respects, where it hasn't had a huge impact on how I operate as a councillor, and certainly from the feedback from the public. Again, it hasn't been too onerous a situation for them. Again, like previous members as well, that my appreciation goes out to all the staff and your team to making sure that has actually has happened. Your report also focused on what I would determine as IT hardware or IT hard skills, hard knowledge, with an edge to it in terms of IT soft skills and soft knowledge and soft experience. And that's the area I want to focus on. It's a little bit like Amanda was referring to there. She actually highlighted a number of areas I was going to highlight. So I'll look at it from a slightly different perspective. In terms of that, we have clearly a diversity of service, clearly a diversity of staff who've had to cope with this particular transformation. And not everyone does fit very neatly into these different boxes. And I think that's where your task has probably been very difficult. So I want to focus on the isolation aspects of it. And in terms of the feedback that you've identified there, it clearly focused on the positives, but built into that, you could clearly see that there was some negative aspects that needed certainly a greater in-depth of analysis. And one of those areas where you talked about staff well-being and resilience, but there was nothing in there about thinking about, was there any informal feedback? Is there any informal meetings taking place? Is there any confidential meetings taking place between staff, so they can really feed back real information and how they're actually feeling, rather than on the like I said, the hard systems that we're talking about there. And I'm particularly referring to the 35% that's indicated that their mental health is being worse. And even managers indicating that 41.8% of their mental health is feeling worse as well. So what work are you doing? And I'm sure it will be ongoing in terms of providing more support mechanisms for the staff in these particular situations, because staff are not always forthcoming in relation to admitting that they have got mental health problems. So what ongoing work have we got to ensure that we are protecting all staff and staff mental health is being protected? Thanks, Chair.
It's a valid point, I've picked up on those factors as well, where 35% of staff themselves feel that their level of mental health is about the same or it's worse. And that discrepancy with the managerial perception of that, where there was a higher number of managers thought that their staff might have been affected by mental health issues, and I don't know if that's concealing issues of mental health that people aren't picking up themselves. Is there an element there that people don't even know they're suffering from mental health issues, and they could be banking those up for the future?
Yes, thank you, Councillor Adam. I'll just give you a bit of a response, and there's so much I could put into that response. What we've tried to do is collaborate the responses from manager surveys and staff surveys. So we've obviously looked at both of them and trying to identify the key themes. We've done an awful lot of work with our managers who actually really want to support staff and recognise that this has been a really, really difficult time, who've really stepped up their game in terms of just that additional support. We've trained managers in managing remotely. We've had a lot of our managers, a high percentage, I think we're something at 80% through mental health, managing staff in terms of mental health and well-being, recognising the signs, having the right discussions with them. Interestingly, what we haven't seen is an increase in the use of the employee assistance programme. We've kept monitoring that throughout the period, and we haven't seen a change in those figures, but not everybody wants to talk to somebody on the phone around that. What we do have is a big number of mental health champions across the organisation who we're also talking to regularly, because a lot of people will talk to people other than managers, so getting intelligence from those as well. And we've had a lot of staff just contact us themselves around how they're feeling, and being quite open and willing to do that, so either coming to HR, coming to trade unions. So it feels like it's quite an open culture around this, and not as much stigma as there was. We've had regular one-to-ones with staff, and we just trying to be as flexible as we can as an organisation. Some people's mental health is due to the situation and their own homework and environment and the work. Some of it is due to their personal situation and not being able to see their loved ones, etc. So there's a whole range of things that we're trying to address and be supportive of, which we're just piling in as much support and flexibility as we can for those staff. I think the isolation has been an issue, which is why we're trying to encourage managers to do as much as they can in teams. We've even had some informal things such as team coffee mornings. We've just continued to do whatever we can to address the situation as best we can. The only other thing I would say is that where we have had particular mental health issues with individuals of significance, we have done our best to be able to return them into a workplace if that would support them. So we've wrapped that additional support around them by working with them and doing the appropriate risk assessments. So some individuals where they've just been really unable to continue to work in the home environment because of the impact on their mental health, we have been able to bring into workplaces with some support and health and safety constraints put around them. So really doing everything we can and just recognising it's different for everybody in this situation, and there are different things that will affect different individuals that will need to be managed slightly differently. But lots of open communications, ways to reach out to staff and ways for staff to reach to us as well, and making sure that we're communicating that constantly.
Thanks for that, Alison. Right, I have 3 members indicating that they wish to speak, so we'll take each of those in turn and we're going to move on. You know, we have quite a heavy agenda to get through, so whilst I don't want to stifle debate, could I ask members please to be brief and straight to the point in the questions. Craig Martin.
Craig Martin, County Councillor for North Lodge in Chesley Street. It's been a massive journey to go more digital, so the question's a simple one. Do we have enough IT staff to be able to deal with what's going on right now? Or if I was to open the door of an office of a home working ICT staff, will they just be a sort of slumped in their chair, bags under their eyes, the amount of effort and work they've done in making this work? So do we have enough IT staff?
Yeah, my response to that would be that in terms of capacity, we have sufficient, providing that we are efficiently prioritising our work, is what I would say. And I think that's alluding to some of the points that have been highlighted previously. You know, we have had to reprofile and pause some of the work that we were doing that we've determined is not priority at this time. To deliver the priority work that we already have done and continue to do, we do have sufficient staff, yes. Though they might have some bags under their eyes.
Thanks, Vicky. Bill Kellett.
Thank you, Chair. As usual, mine is a simple, straightforward question. 1,000 computers for schools sounds a lot. Question, how are they allocated? And given the fact that supply is not likely to meet demands, how are we going to get any extra computers if we need them? Thank you.
Is that within your remit, Vicky?
It doesn't actually sit within my remit. The 1,000 computers that are referred to in the presentation relate to the Department for Education's scheme. The first scheme that they delivered, which was a scheme for disadvantaged children. What the team here at Durham did was support with the installations and the getting those devices out to the schools. So that's the role that we played. But the scheme is actually administered via the schools and the Department for Education. There are some new schemes that are currently out that again are linked to students that are eligible for free school meals. Again, the interface there is directly between the Department for Education and schools, but again, from a supporting schools perspective, we're there to help with any technical queries, any installations, and ensure that the schools have the right capacity to be able to do that. So the actual kit itself comes from the Department of Education and wider government.
Right, thanks, Vicky. I think we might be able to get an answer to Bill from another source, or we might be able to pick it up in the next agenda item on poverty issues. Finally, we have Liz Madison. Liz.
Thank you. Thank you for an excellent presentation, and also my thanks to the staff for the work that they've done in the background. I think you've all worked tremendously well. Thank you. I've got a couple of questions, and that is one of my frustrations is when I'm trying to contact an officer and the phone's ringing out. This isn't customer service, this might be related to other jobs. And it must be awfully frustrating for the staff themselves when they're in a meeting and the phone is ringing out. Is there some simple form that you can actually send a message back to whoever's ringing to say, I'm in a meeting, call you back later? And one of the other things that I'd like to ask is, how do you coordinate the multiple number of messages you must get if somebody is reporting a pothole or a salt bin empty, and there's a lot of people all reporting the same thing? How do you deal with those multi messages so that there's only one response actually given? Thank you.
I think we strain more into customer feedback and performance management issues here, but I don't know if Vicky or Alison have any comment on this query.
Chair, I think Vicky's lost sound.
It looks that way again.
Yes.
Liz, we'll get an answer to you separately. I know that there are performance indicators on telephone calls. There was a question that was raised at another committee just recently, and as I understand it, there are above 80% of telephone calls are answered within the set time. I don't think it's included in all the performance indicators, but if it's a question that's important to you, we'll try and get an answer to you as quickly as we can. It's unfortunate that we've lost Vicky, because I would like to thank both you, Vicky, and Alison for the report you brought this morning. From the amount of questions it's generated, I think it illustrates the importance of the issues that we've been discussing this morning, and also from the amount of gratitude expressed by members. I hope they'll take the best wishes and the gratitude of members back to the staff. And also I'd like to thank you from the chair for the work you've put into this report and for the way you've responded to questions. So thanks very much for that, Alison. And Vicky, if you can hear us, thanks very much. Members, the recommendation in the report is that we note the information in the report and the supporting presentation. Are we happy to do that?
Yeah, agreed.
Agreed.
Thank you for that. That takes us to item 6, poverty issues. Again, it's the report of the Interim Corporate Director of Resources, and we have Andy Palmer to present the report and his presentation this morning. Over to you, Andy.
Thank you, Chair. Just before I start, can I just check everybody can hear and see me? I also have a child at home who has an amazing capacity to hog the Wi-Fi at the most crucial of moments. So I'm just checking everybody can see and hear me. So I think most of you know who I am. I'm Andy Palmer. I'm head of transformation. So obviously had quite an input into the previous report and the work that goes on around transformation. But since February this year, I have taken a strategic role in coordinating a lot of the work that the County Council undertakes around alleviating poverty and the Council's anti-poverty work. And the Council, of course, has been engaged in anti-poverty work in one form or another pretty much since its existence, if you take the broadest terms. But the coordination of anti-poverty work through the Council's Poverty Action Steering Group really took traction about 5 or 6 years ago with the onset of the government's welfare reforms, and in particular the impact that had on residents of the county. So we've coordinated our efforts to try and support our residents, particularly those vulnerable residents who have been, kind of financially less resilient than others. So I took a coordinating role in February, and of course in March everything changed. So the report that you have in front of you is largely an information report, and there is a lot of information in that report. It's a report that went to Cabinet in November last year. And so the first thing that I'm going to point you to is paragraph 2, which is a very short paragraph, but it's a very important one, because the first thing that it says is that the situation with regarding the whole policy environment that we're working within in the anti-poverty world changes rapidly, and I'm sure members are aware of that there are poverty announcements almost daily, policy announcements around anti-poverty work almost daily, with changes, rapid changes in policy. So whilst I go through the report, I'll try and update members of the committee on some of the initiatives that have come on stream since November, or members may have queries on how we've handled some of the policy initiatives that have come in sort of at that time. So I'm hoping members have got sight of the report on their iPads, etc. So what I'll do is I'll run through in particular the executive summary for members. I'll pick out from the main body of the report, I think, some of the main issues and initiatives that the council is involved with, and then obviously through the chair take questions or comments at the end, if that's okay. So just to run through the executive summary. So if we look at paragraph 6. Paragraph 6 talks about the work that the council does in terms of paying benefits. So the council is an agency both to pay national benefits, so things like council tax relief, things like the new test and trace benefit payment systems. The council does pay out an awful lot of benefit to residents of the county in accordance to national schemes. But we also, through our Revs and Benefits service, we have a number of schemes that the council does itself. So we have our own welfare assistance programme, where we pay out daily living expenses, which can provide families with a week's worth of food in an emergency situation through a supermarket, and also help with utilities, etc. So our benefit service is a mix of national schemes, but also some council schemes as well. Paragraph 7 refers to the advice and guidance services that the council has put in place over the years. One of the things that we do, which was perhaps unique in County Durham, is through our Advice in County Durham partnership and portal. We're actually able to give a kind of a no wrong door approach to people who may need multiple advice on everything from housing, fuel credits, benefits, employment support, the Citizens Advice Bureau. We have that coordinated through a single referral system, so that if you go to, if you're at the CA talking to the Citizens Advice Bureau, but you mentioned that you also need, welfare advice, or you need advice with discretionary housing payments, you can be referred automatically by one agency to another. So that's a really good thing that we're able to do. Paragraph, where are we? Paragraph 7 talks about children and families, which is obviously a big issue in the news. I think we hear quite a lot in the news about child poverty. The way that we organise things in County Durham is that we recognise firmly that children are part of families. There is family poverty as much as child poverty, and so we have a work stream which is dedicated to children and families and specific issues that they may be facing. Perhaps the most prominent in the media is holiday activities with food, sometimes referred to as holiday hunger. The County Council has been involved for many years in providing support through its AAPs for a number of schemes that we run through the school holidays to support children with activities in the holidays, but we also ensure that there's a nutritious meal goes alongside that. And obviously that's been ramped up during COVID, and I'll talk through some of the national schemes and the voucher schemes that the council's put in place a little bit later on. Paragraph 8 talks about the work that we do to support people into employment, which is obviously a key alleviator of poverty. It's not as black and white as in work, not in poverty, out of work, in poverty. It's not as black and white as that. In fact, a third of universal credit payments, for example, are paid to people who are in work, and I know that's a debate in the media at the moment. What's really important, I think, for members to know is that the employability programs, and what we mean by employability is, you know, the council works very hard to bring in investment and jobs into the county, and I'm sure members are aware of the, you know, the big schemes bringing Amazon into County Durham, etc. But the softer side of that is to help people to actually access those jobs, and that's working, you know, with our colleagues in further education, working with colleagues in skills and training agencies, different agencies across the council, to coordinate and join up their work to make sure that people get the right advice, guidance, skills training, and routeways into those employment through the more social programmes. And in the previous presentation, Alison touched on some of the work that we've been encouraging our colleagues in the council to do to play our part in terms of apprenticeships, kickstart placements, etc. So that's a really important piece of work, but most of that over the last 10 years has been funded through the European Social Fund, and that's been a very important source of finance to us. In fact, we just got some announcements yesterday. The DWP have agreed to extend the Durham Works programme through the European Social Fund, and also work that the Durham Employability team carry out through European Social Fund. So we've got some extra money there. So really welcome announcement. I do have to say it took a year to approve the bids, which was less welcome, but really good news just yesterday that's come through. And I know that council did support a motion to press government to ensure that the council receives the same levels of resources that it would have received to the new Shared Prosperity Fund had we remained, you know, within the EU and got the structural funds. So that's a really important piece of work that people are engaged with. Paragraph 9 just talks about the refocus that we did in March, and if you were to jump straight to paragraph 90, you'll see that we have overlaid our poverty action plan with some COVID priorities, which I'll run through a little bit later on. Paragraph 10 talks about the huge number of government programmes and support mechanisms for COVID-19 that have been put in place over the last year, and these have been, you know, obviously extremely welcome. Very similar to international efforts in this field, but you know, just running through some of those programmes, everything from right in the kind of initial lockdown. Government food boxes, you know, Jenny's team were absolutely instrumental in identifying vulnerable people in County Durham to receive national food boxes, but we also supported that with local food boxes as well. Wage subsidy, the furlough scheme was very welcome for employees. Things like support for the self-employed, the cessation of the of benefit conditionality. So what that means is if you're currently out of work, the job centre used to be in touch with you regularly, asking you what you'd done to find work, you know, and you had to fill in all sorts of forms. That's been temporarily ceased for the time being. Things like mortgage holidays, The uplift in universal credit, which is very much a reversal of some of the reductions in benefits, has been extremely welcome. I was at the Health and Wellbeing Board yesterday, and one of the recommendations at the end of that meeting, or one of the tasks I was given by both that group and Councillor Surtees, the portfolio holder for social inclusion, was to write to government and really press home just how important that benefit uplift has been in County Durham. And there's been a number of national employment schemes have been announced as well. Kickstart I've already mentioned, and other schemes are coming on stream. Things like the JETS scheme, which is an advice and guidance scheme for people who are out of work. I think probably the main thing for me though is that there are a lot of people now in County Durham through this pandemic have found themselves either on a low wage or out of work, who have never been in that situation before. And so the advice and guidance that we're trying to put in place for people who, as I say, haven't been put in that situation before is absolutely critical. And paragraph 12 talks through some of the work that we've done out in the community through our area action partnerships. So the council put an additional £1.4 million through the AAPs to support the community effort, particularly through the pandemic. But that does build on a lot of the anti-poverty work that's already gone on in the AA, not in the AAP, sorry, through the AAPs and gone on in our communities. And I would just say that it is the community effort that is really, probably the most important thing that we can do. We have some fantastic community partnerships and community agencies in County Durham who support people, day in and day out, and it's been a privilege to work with those people, to be honest. So the recommendation, as I said, is it's really an information report. If I go through some of the main, just the main body, and I will be reasonably brief, Chair, because I am conscious of time, and I'm sure members have got comments and questions. So if I just pick out, so if members have a look at paragraph 19, that just talks about some of the additional resource that we put in the APs that I've just mentioned. We've also got extra resource from government. Members might have been aware of the DEFRA grant that was given to us in the summer, DEFRA being the Department for Environment, Rural Things. So they gave us a grant. We got £693,000 to support kind of anti-poverty work, and particularly those needing access to food and utilities. So we got that money in from DEFRA. That was really helpful to us. If you have a look at paragraphs 26 to 35, highlight a lot of the national research around poverty in the UK. And I'll just obviously allow members to have a look at that research. There's plenty more research, but it's just to make the point that the initiatives that we are involved with are evidence-based as much as they can be, although some of that evidence is just what people present with sort of in front of you. But there's a lot of evidence around the situation in the country and obviously the situation in County Durham as well. If you look at paragraph 36 onwards, you'll see some of the local data that we capture. So I just go back to our own revenues and benefits service. Obviously, we capture a lot of information about how many people are now claiming council tax benefits, how many people are applying for welfare assistance, how many people are claiming universal credit, And what we've seen is, unsurprisingly, and I'm sure members aren't surprised at this at all, we've seen a steady increase in claims. Things like council tax benefit peaked in May, where the first sort of shock of the pandemic eased off a little bit over the summer. Numbers are climbing again. They haven't quite got to the peak of May. Some other sort of local statistics that I think are interesting. Food bank use has obviously increased recently. I'm sure members would be aware of that. But food bank use was actually higher this time last year than it is this time this year. And the reason for that is because of the additional support that is available to people through the community, through community groups who have really rallied during the pandemic to provide food parcels for people and to provide an alternative source of kind of welfare assistance, if you like. So that's something we keep an eye on. Food bank stocks are very high. The response from the public has been very, very good. So moving on from that, if members have a look from paragraph 40 onwards, so paragraph 40 all the way to paragraph 78 documents a lot of the information on the national programmes and national schemes available. So it runs through the furlough scheme, the job retention scheme, I'm sure everybody is aware of. Things like the job support scheme, which was an alternative to redundancy. The test and trace support payments. I know people call it track and trace, it is test and trace. The reason that's important to emphasise the word test and trace is that the payments are reliant on the test and trace system that the government introduced in the summer, and I'm sure members are aware there's been some teething problems with that with that system, and payments are reliant on that test and trace system. So you have to have a referral through it, and that's why you'll see some of the huge discrepancies in the number of people who apply for test and trace and those who are successful. The criteria is national, strict, and it is reliant on, as I say, the test and trace system. Kickstart scheme is something the council's involved with. That's a job subsidy scheme for young people. And I think we'd be hopeful that that is extended to older age groups if the furlough scheme comes to an end. And free school meal vouchers, I'm sure members are aware that has been in the news a lot over the summer. I have to say I am grateful to a prominent footballer for bringing this to national attention. It's been incredibly helpful in all of the lobbying efforts to provide additional support to parents and children over school holidays. So the government did provide a voucher scheme over the summer holidays. That wasn't extended to October half term, but the council provided its own voucher scheme over the October half term, where we provided parents with a voucher of £15 per child that was eligible for free school meals through the council's own systems, through our customer services team that Vicky runs. So that was really helpful. Over the Christmas and February, and will be February half term, we received an additional grant from government for winter support, and we're able to give parents a voucher of £20 per child on free school meals per week. So that's 2 weeks worth in the Christmas holidays, and then a week in February. And the reason that's £20, it is to cover, it's a £15 voucher for food, but also just an additional amount of money to try and help parents displace utilities costs and just a little bit extra money for that, which is what the government grant was for, food and utilities. So we were able to do that. So talk about food parcels. The rent eviction ban has been really helpful. I'm sure members are aware of our Housing Solutions service, and Housing Solutions have been working incredibly hard with people to keep people, keep a roof over people's head, and working with the benefits system for people. But having that rent eviction ban, that mortgage holiday rent kind of mortgage ban has been incredibly helpful to us. And then I'll just talk through paragraph 76, etc. Some of the things that I'd already talked about in terms of benefit conditionality. So the council's response to all of this, it's kind of enormous number of schemes and policy changes from government, is to try and wrap around that and to try and provide support where other people aren't going. And we've done that through two things, I think. Kind of one is direct provision from the council, either direct benefits, as I mentioned earlier, things like daily living expenses, or new schemes. We've introduced things like the back to school grant to try and help parents with back to school costs. So we introduced that in September. But the main thing I'd say we do is that we try and support our communities and community groups, because that is where the real kind of engine of welfare support is. So a lot of support that we've done through our AAPs, etc., to try and galvanise support within communities. We refreshed, if you look at paragraph 83 onwards, we refreshed our poverty action plan. And within the appendix, you'll see the kind of breadth of activity that the council undertakes. And if you look at paragraph 90, which I promised earlier on, and we've got to paragraph 90, I overlaid the poverty action plan with 4 themes of community resilience, employment and personal self-worth, welfare and money matters, and children and families. And underpinning all 4 of those is a digital theme. It's incredibly important that we support people digitally through this pandemic, because practically every service you want to access, whether it be council or elsewhere, is online. And I know talking earlier about we've still got some paper-based systems in the council, but if you want to get advice from the Citizens Advice Bureau, it's online. If you want benefit advice, it's online. So it's there's been a big effort to try and support people. Things like supermarket slots are all online. So that's been a theme that we've run through this. And then the next paragraphs just go through a lot of the stuff that I've mentioned. The money through the AAPs, the support we give to food banks, and of course the County Durham Together community hub that we established at the start of the pandemic, which is still operational through this current lockdown, and that's very much a person-centered approach. So people ring the community hub, somebody rings them back, and we look at a holistic kind of set of interventions for whatever their needs are, which includes getting them a food box if they need one, doing a pharmacy run for them if they need it, etc. And then the remaining paragraphs talk through the employment schemes that we do as a council through Employability Durham, etc. We do mentoring. We've got the Durham Works for young people, and then of course just talking through some of that welfare and money matters. Emergency food parcels that we still have, daily living expenses, etc. And access to credit is something that we're looking at the moment as well. I was shown a leaflet the other day. I think the Provident have been leafleting people in East Durham, perhaps elsewhere in the county, but certainly one in East Durham is one I saw, offering people credit at an interest rate of 500%. So it's really important that we get the message out about cheaper forms of credit. And then the work through the children families that I've mentioned, cutting the cost of the school day, etc. Paragraph 95 onwards just talks about some of the investments that the council has put in place through the one-off investment through the MTFP last year, supplemented through some of the other government grants. The future direction is to try and put a sustainable response into not just the long-standing poverty issues and to support struggling families in the county through the pandemic, but as I said, more long term than that. So just a good initiative we're working with at the moment is an organisation called the Bread and Butter Thing, and there are a number of agencies in County Durham that are helping people with food, but I just highlight this one because it's indicative of a sustainable approach whereby that's an organisation who gather surplus food from national sources, and it is distributed through community groups or schools where people are members of the scheme, and they can access typically £35 worth of surplus food for £7. So people are paying for their food, and it's a really good bridge between a food bank and perhaps maybe a low cost supermarket such as Aldi or Lidl, but that's a community response, and that was launched in East Durham at the time of this report went to Cabinet in November, and we're hoping to spread that out to another 10 to 15 community groups throughout the county. So it's a comprehensive report, Chair, and there's a lot of information in there for members, both in the body of the report and the appendices. I won't ramble on any further, and obviously through yourself, Chair, happy to take any questions or comments.
Thanks for that, Andy. As you say, it's a very weighty report. There's a lot of valuable information in there, and of course it's an ever-changing landscape in terms of policy. So when the report was written back in November, an awful lot of things have changed. But when I finished reading this report earlier this week, I thought I had a handle on all of the policy, and everything changed overnight. The test and trace support scheme you're talking about, it appears now that the government are looking at a range of options to deal with the very low take-up of the test and trace scheme. And although it's about finance, it's also a public health issue as well, to try and prevent people from going to work with symptoms and to enable them to stay at home to protect the workforce and other people. So there is an awful lot of information. I have a number of members that are indicating that they wish to speak, and we'll start with Mark Wilkes.
Thanks, Chair. And you're right, there's that much in here. We could be talking for days on end about the various elements of it and questioning and challenging different things. And I asked for some figures from an officer about the universal credit side of things in the county. And 13 months ago, we had about 30,000 claimants. And we're now up to probably over 52,000 universal credit claimants. But the government doesn't. The government seems to be making up of ministers who just haven't got a clue what it's like to struggle financially, quite honestly. And what's going on with universal credit at the moment, and the failure to commit to what's going to happen with the uplift and protection for people. I mean, it's completely unacceptable, and it's deranged because it's totally counterproductive for the government to leave people panicked and worrying, and to put people in positions where they just haven't got a clue what's going to happen in a couple of months' time. And I think we all accept that they've spent an absolute fortune, the government, of taxpayers' money trying to get us through this. But there's been a complete failure there to recognise on the ground just how serious an impact it has been for some people. And the worry I've got is that come 3rd of March, which isn't very far off, we're not going to see from the Chancellor the support that's needed to get our county through the next 12 months. I personally think that every county councillor, we should be standing up with a formal announcement from County Durham that they must continue the additional £20 uplift. But it's not going to be enough. And the worry I've got is what the pressure is going to be on people, and what the pressure is going to be on our officers dealing with the fallout from all this, because we already know there's a lot of pressure on council officers. But what we don't know is behind all this structure, because so much stuff is now being dealt with through online and DWP. We used to get things like, as councillors, we get a list of how long it was taking to process a benefit claim and things like that. We don't see the same kind of information before, because so much of it is online or outside of the council's control. And I'm just wondering if we've got any feel for what the pressure is on the officers that are working in the different departments, and if we have any means of working out how long people are waiting for assistance on certain things. Because that link with DWP, it's never there. You try and get hold of them about a universal credit claim for somebody, and it's hopeless at times trying to deal with it. So have we got any indication from the officers of how much information they can give us, so we understand, even though we accept that there isn't enough support, at least we know how long it's taking for people to deal with things, whether we've got enough staff in our energy department or support services or whichever other department is helping people, because it's the only way we can really judge and help, by saying, right, well, we've got too much pressure there, let's say get some more employees into that area, or we've got a problem there, let's lobby our MPs. It's really difficult for us to know at the moment where the problems are lying behind the scenes. Thanks, Chair.
Andy, before you answer that question, on the universal credit uplift, did I understand you correctly when you said that Angela Surtees, the relevant portfolio holder, would be writing to government about this? Because my personal opinion is, yes, of course, it needs to be extended. I would argue that it needs to be made permanent, and there's a minimum £20 uplift as well, because it isn't just allowing families in need to put food on the table and to heat the homes. It's about spiking some kind of demand in the local economy as well. Give people money in the pockets to spend. You know, you generate some kind of demand in the local economy then as well. So it hits so many benefits in so many ways. Now, I thought I heard you mention during the report that Angela had picked this up, but if you would confirm that, please, before you answer Mark's question.
Yes, Chair, it's actually two sources. So Councillor Surtees, as you rightly say, the portfolio holder has asked for a letter to be prepared to government on this issue. And I was also at the Health and Wellbeing Board yesterday, and the Health and Wellbeing Board have asked for a very similar thing. So yeah, I would say there is a groundswell of opinion, momentum to lobby government on this issue. Yeah, absolutely.
Andy, I think Mark wants to come in before you answer
It was just to back up what you're saying there, Chair, on the economy, because most of the public might not be aware, but £1 million, that's how much money a week that extra £20 is putting into our local economy at the moment. Because people think, oh, especially people who are on very high incomes might think, why does £20 really have much of an impact? But for somebody on a low income, it has a massive impact. And then £1 million extra into our local economy suddenly being taken away in 2 months' time would be an absolute disaster at a time when we've got shops closing and so many people struggling. So it's a really valid point, Chair, about the economics of this, the wider economics as well.
Sorry for the interruption, Andy, if you want to answer Mark's question.
No, that's fine. A lot of what Councillor Wilkes said was a political point about lobbying for the resources and etc. So, which is obviously more a comment. But Mark, you did ask specifically about pressure on staff and the times to process benefits. So what we've been able to do through the revenues and benefits team, we've been able to utilise some of the things like the because there is a ban on evictions. We've been able to work with our colleagues in the social housing sector. And so right at the outset of the pandemic, where there was real pressure on additional welfare assistance claims coming in, additional council tax reduction payments coming in, we were able to prioritise those and then move as that kind of eased off, then move that resource back into things like housing benefit payments. We were allowed to. It enabled us that little bit of flexibility within our own services to prioritise. I would say to you that, of course, staff are under pressure, and what we also did was through the community hub. We allowed some discretion within the community hub if families were contacting us over the weekends, where staff are not necessarily available in the housing benefit type world. We empowered those staff to be able to provide an emergency food parcel or emergency food assistance over the weekend. And then we, kind of picked it up on the Monday. So through a combination of being able to move resource around and being very pragmatic with the additional resource we put into the County Durham hub, we've been able to do that. You're right that universal credit claimants have the numbers have gone up. I mean, obviously, I can't speak for how DWP are handling that. What I would say is what we've noticed is that a significant part of that uplift in universal credit is people under 24, and so a lot of our employment support has been directed by that. But in direct answer to your question on resources, yes, staff are under strain, of course. We have been able to put additional resource in, but we've also had the flexibility to be pragmatic and use that resource where it's most needed.
Right, thanks, Andy. I have Richard Bell and Eddie Adam next. I want to take them both in turn, and I'm afraid we'll need to move on. Richard?
Right, thanks, Chair. Richard Bell, Barnard Castle West Division. My question, Andy, is about free school meals vouchers. So I'll tell you how I understand it works, and then you correct me if I'm wrong, and I'll wind up with a question. So I'm talking about term time here, not holidays. Yeah, term time. So if you've got a child that is normally at school and would receive free school meals, and now they're at home because of COVID, my understanding is that as from Monday of this week that the National Voucher Scheme is live again, and you should be able to get vouchers. So my question is then, the schools will already have been funded for my child having free school meals had my child been attending school. What happens to the money that the schools have got for free school meals that they are no longer needing because the vouchers are being supplied? Because there's an element of double funding going on there. So I'm presuming it just goes into the school's budget. But is there a way that we can monitor that and ensure that schools will actually spend that money on relieving food deprivation in children or whatever, and not just bank it and use it for other purposes?
Yeah. Yeah, I'm not aware if that is double funding, Richard, because the actual sort of mechanics about how schools are funded for free school meals, I think some of that is retrospective. So I'll rather than give you an answer that I'm unsure of, I'll check with the free school meals team and give you an answer. I don't think that the schools benefit financially from the voucher scheme, but I will check that out for you, particularly because some schools don't engage in the voucher scheme because the choice of supermarkets might not be available locally, particularly in areas like your own. Some of our rural communities might, it might be, 10 miles to an eligible supermarket, and in those instances, often the school will provide either a pickup meal or excuse me, or a delivery service. So I don't think there is a negative financial incentive for schools to provide their own meals, but I will just check that with the school meals team, just in case I'm wrong on that. But I don't think there's a double funding issue.
No, you're okay with that. It may pay to get some of their information back to the Children and Young People's Scrutiny Committee as well, because we've been looking at a wider issue around free school meals and, more importantly, the take up of free school meals. I understand from performance figures there's a gap of around 4% or 6%, sorry, or 4,000 families who were not taking up free school meals. Now, clearly there's an impact on the child, there's an impact on the family, there's an impact on the school in terms of they're not picking up pupil premium from the take up free school meals. So it's all part of the same issue around free school meals. So if we can get that information back to the Children and Young People's Committee, it would be helpful. Andy, are we okay with that, Richard? You okay with the answer? Right, finally we go to Eddie Adam. Eddie.
Thanks, Chair. Thanks, Andy, and clearly recognise the extent and the wide range of the report that's presented. Just a very brief comment in terms of what Councillor Wilkes was referring to in terms of the universal credit uplift. Obviously, that needs to be retained to improve the welfare of our community, but also to the local economy. But I would even go further to say actually welfare benefits need to increase, because we need to make sure that our local economy can get out of this COVID situation. But that's just a comment. My question really relates to paragraph 46 to 50, self-employed and income support scheme that's referred within the report. And we hear, you know, many times that there's huge amounts of money spent in the economy to support businesses, etc., which there clearly are, and you know, and I think that clearly needs to be recognised by everyone in the country. There's a huge amount of money gone into supporting businesses. However, we're also aware that there are specific businesses who have received very little money and very little support through this particular period. I have businesses in my particular area specifically, and I'll mention two particular types, obviously hairdressing and tattooists, who their businesses have virtually closed. They've got no income coming in, yet they've still got a huge amount of expenditure. So I think it was important that you did know, Andy, that people going on to universal credit, such as people like that, are you know, they're not used to that. They don't know how the system works, etc., and they find it very, very difficult, and they've still got all their bills, whether it's their mortgages, to pay. So therefore, are we aware as an authority about how many businesses have actually fell through that gap, and what impact it is actually having on those particular individuals? But also, just as important, what is the actual impact on our local economy, and also possibly the future in terms of our uptake in terms of council tax, because obviously that's going to have an impact in relation to our income as a council to be able to support the community going forward. Thanks, Chair.
Andy?
Yeah, so obviously the points that you're making, Councillor Adam, are extremely valid. And of course, a lot of these national schemes, they have criteria attached to them. Welcome though they are, of course, you know, furlough schemes and the scheme for the self-employed. There's a couple of gaps, I think, in the scheme for the self-employed. One is documented really extensively at the moment in the media, and that is that payments are based on a 3-year rolling average. And if you have taken time off and it's maternity leave, which is being highlighted at the moment, then your payments are reduced. And I know there's quite a lot of lobbying around that. The other, though, is that there's a difference between your business being forced to close because of COVID. You know, you're being told you must close this pub, you must close this hotel. That is different to people whose the market for their business has disappeared because of COVID. So if we give the example, I've just given a hotel. So a hotel has to close. That means that the staff are furloughed, they get paid a wage. But that hotel probably you know, hosts weddings. Well, if you're a wedding photographer and every venue that hosts weddings has disappeared, then your market has disappeared, but you haven't been forced to stop being a wedding photographer. There are just no weddings anymore. And so you end up on universal credit. I don't think anybody knows exactly what those numbers are, who used to be self-employed, and some people, of course, are a mix of self-employed and employed. What we do know, and it was highlighted earlier, is that the numbers coming on universal credit are rising, and there is a number of reasons for that, and you know, self-employed is one. I would say that the council and other agencies are acutely aware of the potential cliff that we would be walking off if the furlough scheme was ended, if the scheme for the self-employed was ended, and the uplifts in universal credit that people are relying on was ended all at the same time. The economic shock for that in the country and in County Durham would be enormous. So I'm sure everybody in the country is lobbying for a phasing out of those benefits as the economy you know, opens up and recovers. So yeah, we are acutely aware of that. Our colleagues in Business Durham are of course talking to businesses regularly. There is some good news, Councillor Adam, on the economy. Whilst retail sector, hospitality sector has been severely hit, of course, by this pandemic, and as I said, some of those support industries, you know, such as wedding photographers, tattoo artists that you've mentioned, and many others. There are opportunities as well. We've seen an uplift in the number of opportunities around logistics. You know, as more goods and services are distributed online, there's more driving type jobs. We brought Amazon into the county. That opened up and provided us a jobs boost at the very time we needed it. We've had a Morrison's open up in the east of the county, which has provided 350 jobs when we most needed it. The net effect is still down, don't get me wrong, but I do think it is just it is worth mentioning that in County Durham we've had some good news stories as well, which has partially offset some of that economic shock.
Thanks, Andy. Amanda, did you want to come in on that point?
Yeah, it was just very quickly picking up on what Eddie said regarding the businesses who haven't been able to benefit, and there are a lot of businesses who work out of someone else's premises, and because they don't have it in their own right, haven't been able to claim a penny. And I'm going to declare an interest, although I don't get paid from it. I run such a business, and it provides before and after school care within a school environment. So because key workers have to stay at school, we have to stay open, which means I can't furlough everybody, but it also means the income has reduced by about 95%, because most people are still at home so they can pick them up. It is just a handful of people who need the facility, but the facility has to stay open by law because you have to provide a facility for key workers. So that the company I run won't be the only one out there that operates like that, but they are the type of businesses that are community-based businesses, not for profit, offer a service, but who are unable to get any funding to stay open when they have to.
That's a valid point, Amanda. I was about to raise it anyway when we wound up, because I've been contacted by owners of a few businesses who don't have a property, so they can't claim benefits on the back of a rateable value of the property because they don't have a property. You know, so there's a lot of people being left behind. You know, they're left out of the picture altogether. So it's a valid point there, Amanda. Do you have any points on that, Andy?
No, other than, you know, obviously we're all aware of the these issues, and that you know, as I say, national schemes very, very welcome, but there are you know, holes within them, and I'll talk to our colleagues in Business Durham and see if there is any help and support that can be offered to those businesses who are falling through the gap. So I will raise that for you.
Thanks, Andy. There's nobody else wishing that indicating that they want to speak, so I'll thank you, Andy, for taking us through that report. Very weighty, lots of very good information, some good questions came out of it. So thanks for that, Andy. For members, we recommend to note and comment on the progress being made by the council in relation to poverty issues. Are we happy to accept the report?
Agreed.
Agreed. And thanks again, Andy. That takes us to item 7 on the agenda, which is the County Durham Partnership Update, and we have Julie Bradbrook to take us through this report. Julie.
Thanks, Chair. As Chair said, my name is Julie Bradbrook. I'm the Partnerships Team Manager. This report, which members have sight of, just provides an overview of the work of the wider County Durham Partnership. And that also includes the work of the safeguarding boards, our work of our voluntary community service and the 14 area action partnerships, and shows the breadth of the strong and effective work of partners across the county. I'll just pull out, obviously members have sight of the report, and I'll just pull out some of the key areas to showcase some of the work of the partnership. Obviously at this time we couldn't not mention COVID and obviously the effect the pandemic has had on our communities, but our mature relationships and enhanced work that we've done across our partnership have coordinated our response at both the local and strategic levels. So if members can refer to paragraph 29 to 41 of the report, that outlines some of our responses to the pandemic. So I'll just note a few. Obviously, Andy's mentioned already around the County Durham Together Hub, which was established to support residents particularly at the start of the pandemic to access food and essential supplies, and obviously that as the work of that has progressed as needs of communities have developed through the pandemic. We have also launched a Community Champions programme to ensure that consistent key messages are shared across our communities, and these champions liaise with AAPs and other local groups, so we better understand the needs of our communities. Obviously, it's really important that we get those consistent key messages to make sure that people understand why we're doing the actions that we're doing. Again, Andy mentioned the 1.4 million coronavirus support fund that was shared across 14 AAPs. That funding has been allocated to support 291 projects across the council. In paragraphs 42 to 44, work is outlined of work that took place in the autumn with our autumn AAP events. There was the opportunities, particularly for groups and individuals, and how they've been supporting their community in the pandemic, and obviously as well as hearing from our Director of Public Health of how people can play their part, particularly by looking at the Community Champions programme, which I've just mentioned. Also around that, looked at work around the County Durham vision and how communities can shape our future activities. First time that those events had been done virtually, obviously across all 14 area action partnerships, and across all those events we received 1,300 comments and feedback around that. So, you know, obviously that interaction with people was really proved really helpful. Paragraphs 45 to 53, again, Andy has mentioned particularly around the impact of child and family poverty in the county, and the work around our holiday activity programme with healthy food. Again, from the Easter to October school holidays during 2020, 184 projects were allocated funding across 14 APs to provide that resource for families. We've received output from 115 of those projects, and 14,500 beneficiaries have benefited across the county. Obviously, we'll see that increase as the remainder of the projects report back. Paragraph 54 to 60 shows the work of the safeguarding boards across the county, so that focuses on the Children's Safeguarding Children's Partnership and the local Safeguarding Adults Board. Both have recently completed and released their annual reports, which show again the breadth of their work. The County Durham vision for 25 was written with our partner organisations and also, more importantly, the public, to set out what we want the county to look like in 15 years' time. So obviously that's structured around the 3 ambitions, which is the more and better jobs, people live long and independent lives, and connected communities. And the County Durham Partnership has recently looked at a new structure to ensure that they align with those 3 ambitions around the vision, so we can get that linkage across what we're trying to do. From paragraph 61 of the report, there are a number of examples of activities and projects which have been undertaken by the wider County Durham Partnership, and that includes the area action partnerships and the voluntary community service, etc. And they are listed under the 3 vision objectives that I've mentioned around more and better jobs, people live long and independent lives, and connected communities. Obviously, there's a range of varied and impressive projects covering a number of areas. So they look at areas around job creation, around mental health, our Durham Youth Council, which looks at how young people are engaged in particular areas and how we support our work, support for our armed forces veterans, work on community safety, and again the work that's happening on our climate change. As I said, there's more details within the report, but obviously due to time, Chair, I'll just keep it brief, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Thank you for that, Julie. Again, it's another very thorough report with a lot of detail in it, and I do acknowledge that we've been through a number of the issues that are raised in the report. Certainly those related to the response to COVID-19 and the response to poverty issues. But there are still questions from the floor. The first one is Amanda Hopgood.
Yeah, thanks, Chair. It's not so much a question, more as a comment for future reports. It's a really good report. It highlights all of the positive things, and I'm a huge advocate of the AAPs, always have been, that they do. But a lot of it concentrates on projects and what we've done, and some of the work it's just as important but goes unseen, which is where we put groups, we connect them and use the partnership part of the AAP. So if we have 2 groups and we bring them together, it doesn't actually cost money, but it makes a huge difference. So an example from us last year in Durham was we had one group who were making the visors for people for PPE and donating them, and someone else got in touch from a deaf group, and the biggest problem that deaf people have is they can't lip read for people wearing face masks. So we were able to just, one provider provided them with a load of visors, and they were able to still communicate with people, and that cost nothing. It didn't involve any project, it was just linking 2 people together, and I think we should promote how much we do that, because it tends to be forgotten, and it's a massive thing that the AAPs can do, and it generates those communities working together.
Yeah, it's a valid point, Amanda. We have to take that on board, Julie.
Yeah, that's absolutely fine. We'll make sure we include that in the future.
Okay, thank you. I don't have any other members indicating that they wish to speak. So with that, I'll thank you, Julie, for your report. And for members, are we happy to know the contents of the update? I'll take the deafening silence as a yes. That takes us to item 8 on the agenda, which is the notice of key decisions. Jenny Howard.
Thanks, Chair. Jenny Howard for the Strategy for the Council. This report sets out the list of key decisions that are scheduled to be considered by the Executive. Paragraph 7 of the report highlights that the notice of key decisions that is attached at Appendix 2 is the latest to be published prior to the papers for the board being dispatched to members. and it complies with the requirements for Cabinet to be able to take key decisions at their meeting on the 10th of February 2021. The attachment Appendix 2 includes detail of 5 key decisions and is there for members' information being recommended to consider the items listed in the notice, Chair.
Thank you, Jenny. The item is for information. Are we happy to accept that? Amanda?
Yeah, you knew that I would have to speak on this one in particular.
Well, I was fingers crossed, but it didn't work.
Yeah, you thought you could pass it quickly without us getting in. I just think this document, I would like Overview and Scrutiny to be able to use it as a working document. The information we'll get on it is usually too late for us to have any impact on. There isn't time. It's the first time we hear about it. As it stands, it's just a tick box exercise to say that you've told us about it. And I wondered, Chair, if you would be prepared to consider a working group to have a look at how we could adapt this so that it actually becomes a useful tool rather than something that we're being told is happening or has already happened and will have very little impact or discussion on it.
We could have a look at that, Amanda. As I understand it, the report's more a legal requirement, you know, just to make sure that if anybody's going to make a decision, they have to notify people 28 days in advance. I think it's 28 days. So it's just going through that formal process. Jenny, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, Chair. Yeah, it is a legal process. I appreciate the point Councillor Hopgood's making. It. I don't know she's made it previously, and but the process we have and the notice is reflecting the legal requirement and the timescale to publish information ahead of those executive decisions. Just to say, in terms of usage of the report as a scrutiny team in support of the committees, we do make use of it in that every time it is published, we scan that notice, and you'll note in the final column on Appendix 2, we include details of scrutiny involvement. So you can see in relation to the final budget report, we've obviously built in the special meeting that's focusing this meeting next time on the 11th of February to scrutinise that Cabinet report. And then you'll see on the last item at Appendix 2, in relation to the Towns and Villages report, there's going to be consideration at economy and enterprise scrutiny on the 23rd of February in relation to progress with the Towns and Villages programme, Chair. So it is to say we do make that link.
I think it has been helpful in notifying members, certainly members of committees, in advance of things that might be coming their way. Towns and villages you mentioned as an example, you know, that could be interesting in future work programmes for the Economy and Enterprise Committee. So it does flag up issues that are coming our way in scrutiny. But as I mentioned right at the beginning, it is a formal legal document that has to be published, as I understand, before those decisions can be made. How we use that in scrutiny is flagging up issues coming our way, and you know, that's fine if we say it that way. Are we happy to accept that report? Richard?
Sorry, yes, happy to accept. Sorry to come in late. Just to say that I think what Amanda's asking for is not causing any more work. I'm sure all this stuff is up there because there'll be forward plans of what's going to corporate management team. So I'm sure that information is already there. To me, it's just a matter of pulling it out and using it. But I fully support the report. Thanks, Chair.
Okay, thanks for those comments, Richard. We'll accept the recommendation then. Item 9 on the agenda is any other business. I haven't been notified of any other business, so that concludes the meeting. Dem services will be muting the microphone soon, so please remain seated until you receive the announcement. And thank you everyone for your input this morning. We've had a good meeting, lots of interesting points raised. So thanks for coming along. Stay safe, and we'll see you all soon. Thank you.